Angry young billionaire kicks a shopping cart blocking his way. But when he hears twin girls crying inside, he panics. Asher Lowell hated grocery stores. He hated the lines, the artificial lights, and the noise of people who always seemed to walk too slowly. That Thursday at 10:15 p.m., he was particularly annoyed. His meeting with Japanese investors had run 3 hours longer than planned, and all he wanted was to get back to his penthouse apartment at the Sky View. "I just need coffee," he muttered to himself, striding through the aisles of the 24-hour market. His phone vibrated in his pocket, another message from Rebecca, his assistant, about the next morning's conference. Asher grabbed the most expensive coffee off the shelf without looking at the price. He also picked up a package of imported cookies and a bottle of whiskey, his dinner for the last 3 days. In line, he checked his watch for the 5th time. He paid with a black card, not waiting for the receipt, and walked quickly to the exit. The parking lot was almost empty at that hour, with only a few spots occupied by night shift employees. That's when he saw the cart. It was blocking the nearest exit, a shopping cart abandoned between 2 parking spaces. Asher rolled his eyes and let out an impatient sigh. He started to walk around it, but something made him stop. The cart moved. On its own. "Oh, what the hell?" He approached and kicked the cart to the side. That's when he heard it, faint at first, then clearer. A cry. No, 2 different cries. Asher froze. He slowly bent down and looked inside the shopping cart. 2 pairs of huge eyes stared back at him. "My God," he whispered. 2 little girls were huddled inside. Identical, with messy brown hair and simple dresses, dirty at the edges. They looked to be 3 or 4 years old at most. "Hey!" Asher called out, awkwardly. "Are you okay? Where's your mum?" The girls hugged each other tighter. One of them started to cry louder. Asher looked around the empty parking lot. No sign of adults looking for children, no security guard. No explanation for 2 small children abandoned in a shopping cart at 10 o'clock at night. "Okay, stay calm," he said, trying to sound confident. His first instinct was to go back into the store and find help. But something made him hesitate. It was late. The store was nearly empty. What would happen to these kids? They'd be taken to some temporary shelter. Separated, maybe. The girl who wasn't crying watched him intently, as if trying to decide if he could be trusted. "Are you hungry?" he asked, softening his tone. The girl nodded slightly. Without much thought, Asher opened his shopping bag and offered them the package of cookies he had just bought. "You can have these." They hesitated for a second. Then the braver one took the package and opened it with difficulty. She took out a cookie and gave it to her sister first, then took one for herself. They ate slowly, watching Asher cautiously. Something in Asher's chest tightened as he saw that gesture. Children so young shouldn't be so careful with food. "What's your name?" he asked, crouching down to their level. "Harper," replied the girl who wasn't crying. Then she pointed to her sister. "Avery. Harper and Avery," he repeated. "Beautiful names." Avery was still crying softly. Cookie crumbs stuck to her wet cheeks. Harper finished her cookie, her eyes still on Asher. "Where's your mum?" Asher tried again. Harper just shook her head. Avery cried a little louder. Asher looked around one more time. It was starting to rain now, fine drops hitting the asphalt. He couldn't leave them there. He couldn't just walk away. "Come on," he said, making an impulsive decision. "I'm taking you somewhere safe." He expected resistance, but to his surprise, Harper held out her arms to him. Without a second thought, Asher lifted her. The girl was light, frighteningly light for her age. He then leaned over to pick up Avery too, balancing a child on each arm. He walked to his car, feeling the rain getting heavier. The girls clung to him, Avery still crying softly against his shoulder, Harper holding tightly to his shirt. In the car, he improvised as best he could. He didn't have car seats, so he adjusted the seat belts with extra care, promising himself he would drive slowly. "All right, we're going to my place now," he explained, not knowing if they truly understood. "It's safe there." He drove in silence, checking the rearview mirror every few seconds. The girls remained quiet in the back seat. Harper was whispering something in Avery's ear, who gradually stopped crying. What was he doing? This question hammered in his mind as he drove through the city streets. Asher Lowell, 36 years old, hotel industry billionaire, a confirmed bachelor, taking 2 abandoned children home instead of calling the authorities. It was insane. But when he looked in the rearview mirror again and saw Harper watching the city through the car windows, with those big eyes full of cautious curiosity, something inside him settled. He couldn't explain it, but he knew he couldn't just hand them over to strangers that night. He arrived at his luxury building, and the doorman's smile quickly turned into an expression of surprise when he saw the 2 children in the back seat. "Good evening, Mr. Lowell and company," he said, trying to maintain his professionalism. "Good evening, Frank. My nieces are visiting," Asher invented quickly. Please, don't disturb us tonight." "Of course, sir." Asher helped the girls out of the car and guided them to his private elevator. Avery seemed mesmerized by the lobby lights, pointing to the huge crystal chandelier. Harper remained observant, holding Asher's hand as if afraid of getting lost. In the elevator, Avery finally spoke. "Hi," she said in a small voice, looking up as the elevator ascended. "Yes, very high," Asher replied, surprised by the sound of her voice. "I live on the top floor." When the doors opened directly into his apartment, the girls stood still, hesitant to enter. The place was immense, over 4,000 square feet of pure minimalist luxury, with floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the entire city below. "You can come in," Asher said gently. "This is my home." Harper was the first to take a step forward, pulling Avery by the hand. They looked around with wide eyes, at the leather sofas, the enormous TV built into the wall, the chef's kitchen Asher rarely used. "You must be hungry," he said, remembering they had only eaten a few cookies. "Let's see what we have in the kitchen." The truth was he didn't have much. Asher rarely ate at home, preferring restaurants or takeout. He opened the nearly empty refrigerator and found some eggs, milk, cheese, and an apple. "How about scrambled eggs? I can handle that." The girls nodded, still holding hands, watching his every move as if it was something fascinating. Asher prepared the eggs in the simplest way he knew, adding a little cheese. He served them on elegant porcelain plates, the only kind he had, and placed them on the kitchen counter. "Come and eat." The chairs were too high for them, so Asher helped them up. They ate in silence, with a restrained hunger that broke his heart. He cut the apple into small slices and offered it for dessert. As they ate, he observed them more closely. They were absolutely identical at first glance, but now he noticed small differences. Harper had a firmer, more determined look. Avery seemed more sensitive, her eyes still red from crying. The dresses they wore were clean but worn, and a bit too small. Their hair, though disheveled, had been recently cut. They didn't look like children who lived on the streets, more like children whose caretaker was going through a hard time. "Do you know where your mommy is?" Asher tried again, keeping his voice gentle. Harper looked at her empty plate. "She said she was coming back to the store. She said she'd come back to the store." Harper nodded. "She had to do something. Told us to wait." "How long were you waiting?" Harper shrugged, unable to answer. 4-year-olds had no precise concept of time. "It's okay," Asher assured them, seeing the worry in their eyes. "You're safe here." After eating, the girls began to show signs of tiredness. Avery rubbed her eyes, and even Harper seemed to be fighting to stay alert. "Let's get a place ready for you to sleep," Asher said. His apartment had 3 bedrooms, yes, but only one was used, his. The others remained empty, except for a few boxes. He took the girls to his own room, deciding he would sleep on the couch. "You can stay in my bed tonight. Here it's big enough for both of you." He helped them onto the king-size bed, and they seemed tiny amidst the Egyptian cotton sheets. He had no children's pajamas, of course, so they would have to sleep in the clothes they were wearing. "If you need anything during the night, you can call me." "I'll be right out there in the living room." Harper looked at him, her eyes already heavy with sleep. "Are you going to leave?" Something in the simplicity of that question hit Asher deeply. "No," he answered firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." Satisfied with the answer, Harper snuggled up next to her sister. Within minutes, both were fast asleep. Asher stood there for a moment, watching them. The scene was surreal. Two unknown children sleeping in his bed. Children that, for some incomprehensible reason, someone had abandoned. He quietly left the room, leaving the door ajar. In the living room, he collapsed onto the sofa and picked up his phone. He needed advice. "Michael, it's me, Asher. I know it's late, but I need your advice as a lawyer and as a friend." He paused, running a tired hand over his face. "Something unexpected has happened." As he explained the situation to his trusted lawyer, Asher tried to understand his own actions. Why hadn't he just called the police? Why had he brought two strange children into his home? The answer came when he looked at the ajar bedroom door. Those eyes, Harper's eyes, clutching his pants in the parking lot, full of a trust he didn't deserve, had disarmed all his defenses. "I don't know what to do tomorrow," he admitted on the phone. "Legally, what are my options?" As he listened to Michael's cautious advice, Asher knew he was entering unknown territory. His organized and predictable life had been completely destabilized in a single night. And for the first time in many years, the absolute control he maintained over everything around him had been replaced by something much more powerful and terrifying: responsibility for someone other than himself. He looked at the city through the huge windows of his apartment. Out there, somewhere, was a mother who had left her daughters. Tomorrow he would begin the search for answers. But tonight, in this moment, Harper and Avery were safe. And for some reason he couldn't explain, that seemed more important than anything else. The next morning, Asher drove back to the grocery store with Harper and Avery in the back seat. The sun had barely risen, and the streets were still quiet. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw the two girls sitting in silence, wearing the same clothes as yesterday, their eyes fixed on the passing scenery. "Are we going to find Mommy today?" Harper asked, her voice small but full of hope. Asher gripped the steering wheel tighter. "We're going to try, Harper. We'll ask everyone at the store." He had called the night manager as soon as he woke up. No woman had shown up looking for lost children. No one had called, no leads. But Asher needed to try in person. He needed to look people in the eye, show them the girls, make someone remember something. The parking lot was nearly empty at that early hour. Asher parked exactly where he had found the cart with the twins the night before. The girls got out of the car holding hands, looking around as if expecting their mother to appear at any moment. "Do you remember this place?" Asher asked gently, kneeling to be at their level. Avery nodded, pointing to a corner of the parking lot. "The cart was there." "And Mommy went that way," Harper added, pointing toward the street. It was the first concrete piece of information he had. "Did she say anything before she left? Where she was going?" Harper frowned, concentrating. "She said she'd be right back, that it was important." "Was she sad?" Asher continued, trying to understand. "Say she was crying," Avery said softly, "like when the power was out at home." Asher felt a tightness in his chest. There was a story behind these abandoned children, a story he was only just beginning to glimpse. "Let's go inside," he said, offering a hand to each of them. Let's ask if anyone saw your mom." Inside the store, different employees from the night shift were stocking shelves and preparing the store to open. The morning manager, a middle-aged man with a tired expression, listened to Asher's story with growing concern. "Sir, this is very serious, very serious. You should have called the police immediately." "I know," Asher replied, feeling uneasy, "but I thought the mother might come back. She still might." The manager looked at the twins, who were curiously watching an employee stack fruit. "I can ask the morning shift staff, but I doubt anyone saw anything. That part of the parking lot isn't covered by cameras." For the next hour, Asher showed the girls to every employee in the store. He described the woman based on the little information he had. Brown hair like the twins, a blue coat, probably in her early 30s. He tried to remember if he had noticed any woman alone the night before, but he had been so focused on his own shopping that he had barely registered the people around him. "I'm sorry, sir," said an older cashier. "We see so many people every day." And if she was trying not to draw attention— "I understand," Asher replied, feeling more and more discouraged. When the store officially opened, Asher even approached the first customers. He showed them pictures of the girls on his phone, asked if anyone knew a woman with twin daughters, if they had seen anything suspicious the night before. Nothing. No leads. No answers. Is she not coming? Avery asked after 2 hours of fruitless searching, her eyes starting to fill with tears. Asher knelt again, looking into their eyes. I don't know, sweetie, we're trying to find her. What if she doesn't want us? Harper asked, the question Asher had been dreading. I'm sure that's not it, he lied, trying to sound convincing. Sometimes adults have complicated problems. I'm sure she loves you very much. The girls didn't seem entirely convinced, but they accepted the explanation. Asher noticed they were starting to get restless and tired. The initial excitement of the search had turned into boredom and hunger. How about we do some shopping before we go home? He suggested, trying to lighten the mood. We need food, new clothes for you, maybe some toys. The girls' eyes lit up at the mention of toys. The pain of their mother's absence was momentarily overshadowed by the promise of new things. As 4-year-olds, they were easily distracted, a blessing in disguise in this difficult situation. Asher had never shopped for children before. He wandered through the grocery store aisles with Harper and Avery, asking what they liked to eat. The answers were predictable: ice cream, cookies, colorful cereal, but also surprising. Harper liked green apples, and Avery insisted she loved spaghetti, though she made a face at the sight of broccoli. He filled the cart with what he imagined was appropriate food for children, vaguely basing his choices on TV commercials and what the girls themselves requested. He realized he had no idea what a proper diet for 4-year-olds was. After the grocery store, they went to a department store. The girls had clearly never been in such a large place, evident by the way they stared at everything with wide eyes. Can we pick? Harper asked when they reached the children's section. Of course, Asher replied, realizing he had no idea what size clothes they wore. Take whatever you want. The twins ran between the colorful racks, touching fabrics and pointing at patterns they liked. For children who had probably never had many choices before, the experience seemed magical. Avery chose dresses with unicorns and stars, while Harper preferred pants and t-shirts with rocket ships and dinosaurs. How many outfits should I get? Asher asked the saleswoman, completely lost. The woman smiled understandingly. To start, I'd suggest 7 complete outfits: pajamas, underwear, socks, a light jacket, and a warmer one. Asher nodded, trying to memorize everything. And shoes. At least 2 pairs, one comfortable for every day and another nicer pair. Following the saleswoman's advice, and to the girls' delight, Asher bought practically a complete wardrobe for each of them. Enough clothes for weeks, new shoes, coats, even small accessories they admired. Hair clips for Avery, a beanie that Harper immediately put on and refused to take off. The next stop was a toy store. Here, Asher had to exert some control. The girls wanted absolutely everything they saw. He limited them to a few items each: dolls, building blocks, colorful books and crayons and drawing pads. Avery chose a plush unicorn almost her size, and Harper, surprisingly, opted for a toy toolkit. You like fixing things? Asher asked, curious. Harper nodded seriously. Daddy used to fix things. It was the first mention of a father. Asher made a mental note to ask more about that at an appropriate time. The last stop was a children's furniture store. If the girls were going to stay with him longer, and it seemed increasingly likely, they would need their own beds. His apartment had 2 unused guest rooms. One of them could easily become a children's room. Harper and Avery tested beds, tentatively bouncing on the mattresses when they thought Asher wasn't looking. They chose identical beds, but with different comforters: stars for Harper, unicorns for Avery. Can we sleep in the same room? Harper asked, worried. Of course you can, Asher assured her. You'll always stay together. The relief on their faces was palpable. Another detail about their past: they were used to sleeping together and feared being separated. By the time they finally returned to the car, it was late afternoon. The trunk and back seat were crammed with bags and boxes. The girls, exhausted but happy, clutched new toys in their laps, refusing to put them in the bags. On the way home, Asher watched them in the rearview mirror. Harper was patiently explaining to her new doll how the seatbelt worked. Avery hugged her plush unicorn, her eyes already heavy with sleep. They hadn't found any clues about their mother, no answers. It was as if she had simply vanished, leaving only the two small versions of herself behind. Arriving at the apartment, it took Asher 3 trips to bring all the shopping up. The girls explored each bag with renewed enthusiasm, spreading new clothes and toys across the pristine living room floor. "Easy there," Asher said, seeing the chaos unfold. "Let's get everything organized." He tried to establish a system, separating clothes, toys, and food. The girls helped in their own way, which basically meant messing up what he had just arranged, trying on every piece of clothing and opening all the toy packages simultaneously. In an hour, Asher's minimalist and organized apartment had transformed into something unrecognizable. Colorful clothes on the Italian leather sofa, toys scattered on the Persian rug. In the kitchen, cereal boxes and cookie packages occupied shelves that once held only imported coffee and expensive whiskey. "Can we draw?" Avery asked, already opening a box of crayons. "Of course," Asher replied, realizing too late that he hadn't bought any paper. "But only on the table, okay? Not on the wall." He improvised with some sheets from his work notepad. The girls hunched over the coffee table, completely absorbed in their art. Harper drew with surprising precision for her age, recognizable stick figures and houses with smoking chimneys. Avery was more abstract, creating formless explosions of color. "It's our family," Harper explained, showing him her drawing, 3 figures holding hands, 1 big and 2 small. Asher felt a strange sensation in his chest. "Is that me?" Harper nodded. "And me and Avery." "It's very beautiful," he said, genuinely touched. "We can hang it on the fridge." The suggestion was met with enthusiasm. Soon, colorful drawings decorated the stainless steel refrigerator that had previously displayed only a minimalist calendar and magnets from expensive restaurants. While the girls continued to draw, Asher tried to prepare dinner. His culinary experience was limited. He usually ordered takeout or ate out. But now he had 2 small children to feed, and he felt he should offer something homemade. He opted for the simplest thing, pasta with tomato sauce. Even that proved to be a challenge. How long do you cook pasta for kids? Should the sauce be less spicy? Would the girls eat vegetables if he hid them in the sauce? "Can I help?" Harper appeared in the kitchen, watching him struggle with the pots. "You know how to cook?" Asher asked, surprised. "I know how to stir," she answered seriously, pointing to the pot of sauce. Asher grabbed a chair from the dining table and positioned it near the stove, careful to keep it a safe distance from the heat. Harper climbed up and, with a wooden spoon almost her size, began to stir the sauce slowly. "Mommy used to let me help," she explained. Another piece of the puzzle about their past. Asher watched the concentration on Harper's small face as she performed her task with absolute seriousness. There was something deeply moving in that moment, a 4-year-old child trying to reconnect with her previous life through a simple gesture like stirring tomato sauce. Dinner was a chaotic experience. Avery spilled juice on her new t-shirt and started to cry. Harper ate methodically, separating every ingredient in the sauce she didn't approve of. Both talked at the same time, telling disjointed stories about their new toys, asking questions that Asher barely had time to answer. It was noisy. It was messy. It was completely different from any dinner Asher had ever had in his apartment, and, to his surprise, it wasn't as terrible as it should have been. Afterward came the challenge of bath time. The Italian marble bathroom quickly turned into a makeshift swimming pool. Asher had never bathed children and discovered the hard way that it required specific skills, like preventing soapy water from getting in their eyes, convincing small people that washing their hair wasn't torture, and explaining why they couldn't stay in the tub until their fingers got like raisins. "You're doing it wrong," Harper informed him as he tried to detangle Avery's hair, who was screaming as if she were being tortured. "How do you do it, mine, then?" Asher asked, genuinely curious. "You have to start from the bottom," Harper explained patiently, "and hold it up here so it doesn't pull." Asher followed the instructions, surprised by the practical knowledge of a 4-year-old. Avery stopped crying almost immediately. "Where did you learn that?" he asked Harper. "Mommy taught me," she replied simply, "because Avery's hair is just like mine." By the time he finally managed to dry them and dress them in new pajamas, unicorns for Avery, stars for Harper, Asher was exhausted. But the day wasn't over yet. The girls wanted a story before bed. "I don't have any children's books," he explained, realizing he had forgotten to buy any. "Make one up," Harper suggested, settling into her side of the king-size bed they still shared in the master bedroom. The new beds would only be delivered the next day. Asher sat on the edge of the bed with no idea how to begin. He had never told stories before, let alone made one up on the spot. "Once upon a time," he began hesitantly, "there were two princesses." "Twins!" Avery exclaimed. "Yes, two twin princesses," Asher continued, "who lived in a castle in the clouds." "How did they get to the ground?" Harper asked immediately, practical as always. "They had a magic elevator," Asher improvised, thinking of his own private elevator. "What color was it?" Avery wanted to know. "Pink with glitter," Asher replied, making Avery grin from ear to ear. The story continued like that, with Asher improvising every detail and the girls constantly interrupting with questions and suggestions. The narrative made no sense at all. It involved a dragon that only ate ice cream, a castle that could fly, and a prince who was actually a frog but liked being a frog. To Asher, it was confusing and chaotic. To the girls, it was perfect. When he finally reached the end of the story, with the twin princesses saving the kingdom using unicorn superpowers, the girls applauded as if they had just heard the greatest literary masterpiece of all time. "Another one," Avery demanded immediately. "Tomorrow," Asher promised, pulling the blanket over them. "Now it's time to sleep." To his surprise, there were no protests. The girls settled down, Harper on her side. Avery sprawled out like a starfish. Within minutes, they were fast asleep. Asher remained seated on the edge of the bed, watching them. In their sleep, they seemed even smaller, even more vulnerable. How could anyone abandon them? The question had tormented him since he found them. He quietly left the room and went to the living room. The apartment was unrecognizable. Toys on the floor, colorful clothes on the chairs, leftover pasta hardening on plates in the sink, a suspicious stain on the sofa that cost more than some small cars. His phone rang. It was Michael, his lawyer. "Did you find the mother?" he asked bluntly. "No," Asher replied, sitting down among the toys. "Not a single clue. No one at the store saw anything." "We need to discuss the next steps, Asher. You can't just keep children that aren't yours without any legal process." "I know," Asher sighed, running a tired hand over his face, "but I don't want to take them to the system yet. They're adjusting well here." "Asher," Michael said cautiously, "what are you thinking? Don't tell me you're considering—" "I'm not considering anything yet," Asher interrupted. "I just want to make sure we've done everything possible to find the mother before making any drastic decisions." "I understand. A few more days then. But after that, we need to notify the proper authorities." Asher reluctantly agreed and hung up. He looked around at the organized chaos his apartment had become in just one full day with the twins. On the refrigerator door, the colorful drawings shone under the kitchen light. Harper's showed three figures holding hands, him, Harper, and Avery, under a big yellow sun. A makeshift family, drawn by a child who had lost hers. Asher took the drawing, running his fingers over the uneven line that was supposed to represent him. He had never been included in a child's drawing before. It was strange, moving, a little scary. He pinned the drawing back on the fridge and started to clean up the mess in the living room. As he gathered the scattered toys, he found the small plastic screwdriver from Harper's toolkit. He remembered how she had mentioned her father, how her eyes had lit up when she saw that specific toy. There was so much he didn't know about them, so many unanswered questions. In the middle of cleaning, he heard a sound from the bedroom. He went to check and found Avery sitting up in bed, crying silently. "Hey," he said softly, sitting beside her. "What's wrong?" "I dreamed about Mommy," she answered between sobs. Asher felt a tightness in his chest. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to comfort a child missing her mother. "Do you want to tell me about the dream?" was all he could manage to ask. Avery shook her head no, but moved closer to him. Without warning, she laid her head in his lap. The gesture, so simple and trusting, caught him completely off guard. Hesitantly, he began to stroke her hair as he vaguely remembered seeing in movies. Avery relaxed under his touch, her sobs gradually subsiding. "You're nice," she mumbled, already drifting back to sleep. 2 simple words. "You're nice." Said by a half-asleep 4-year-old, it was probably the most sincere compliment Asher had ever received. He continued stroking her hair until she fell back into a deep sleep. Carefully, he settled her next to her sister, who hadn't even stirred. Back in the living room, he looked at the surrounding mess with new eyes. Every scattered toy, every stain, every hanging drawing was proof of life, of joy, even amidst the loss the girls had suffered. Asher had never planned to have children. His life was meticulously organized, predictable, under total control. Children were the opposite of all that, chaotic, unpredictable, impossible to control, and yet, when he remembered Avery's smile upon getting her plush unicorn, or the concentration on Harper's face as she stirred the tomato sauce, or the sound of their laughter during bath time, something inside him shifted. The loneliness he had always accepted as a natural part of his existence now seemed strangely empty compared to the noisy chaos of the last 24 hours. He didn't know what would happen in the coming days. He didn't know if they would find the girl's mother or if the authorities would come for them. He didn't know how to handle the enormous responsibility that had fallen into his lap without warning. But he knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, his apartment didn't just feel like a place to sleep between meetings. It felt alive. And as strange as this new territory was, as much as he stumbled through every detail of childcare, those smiles made it all worthwhile. When he finally lay down on the couch, exhausted, Asher realized that for the first time in years, his own loneliness was no longer the center of the scene, and there was something strangely liberating in that. Michael Steinberg's office was exactly as Asher expected, elegant, discreet, and intimidating. Framed diplomas decorated the walls, and the panoramic view from the top floor showed the city like a living map below them. The lawyer adjusted his thin-rimmed glasses as he organized documents on the mahogany desk. "We've searched every possible record," Michael said, his voice calm and measured as always. "There are no missing person reports matching the girls, no recent records of a woman with twin daughters who went to area hospitals. Nothing." Asher nodded, waiting for him to continue. It was what he already suspected. "The fact is, without locating the mother, there is no simple legal solution," Michael continued, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You have no kinship with them, no prior connection. Legally, you have no right to keep them." "And what's the alternative?" Asher asked, though he already knew the answer. "The foster care system. The girls would enter the adoption process or, more likely, stay in temporary homes until—" "No," Asher interrupted, the words sounding firmer than he intended. "That's not an option." Michael sighed. "Asher, I understand you've developed a bond with them, but we're talking about 2 children who are not yours. There are legal procedures that cannot be ignored. You can't just keep them." "Why not?" Asher asked, surprising himself with the question. "They're safe. They're happy. They have everything they need." "Because that's not how it works," Michael replied patiently. "Even if you wanted to adopt them, and I assume that's not the case, there are processes, evaluations, deadlines. You can't skip these steps just because you have money and good intentions." Asher looked out the window, watching the movement of the city below. 3 weeks had passed since he found Harper and Avery, 3 weeks of chaos, learning, and a strange sense of purpose he had never experienced before. "What if I do want to adopt them?" he asked, the words coming out before he could think them through. Michael blinked, genuinely surprised. "Are you serious?" "I'm considering it," Asher replied, realizing it was true. "But I want to know what the possibilities are." The lawyer put his glasses back on, buying time. "It would be complicated. First, we would need to officially register that the children were abandoned. There would be an investigation to try to locate close relatives. You would have to go through evaluations as an adoption candidate, interviews, home visits, background checks. "I would go through all of it," Asher affirmed. "But there are no guarantees, Asher. A single man, with no experience with children, with a demanding career. I'm not saying it would be impossible, but it wouldn't be easy. And during the process, the girls would likely have to stay in a shelter or foster home. That last part made Asher stand up, restless. That is not acceptable. We're not talking about a business deal you can close with the right amount of money, Michael said, a rare note of irritation in his voice. These are children. There are rules, procedures, however frustrating they may seem. There must be another way, Asher insisted. Michael was silent for a moment, considering. There is one possibility, though I don't recommend it. You could simply do nothing. Continue as you are, hoping the mother shows up. But that's risky, Asher. If you're discovered, you could face charges of kidnapping, illegal custody. I didn't kidnap them, Asher protested. They were abandoned. Yes, but you didn't report it to the authorities. Legally, you're on dangerous ground. The silence hung between them for several minutes. Finally, Michael sighed. Look, I'll research other options. Maybe we can get emergency temporary custody, but it will have to be done through official channels, Asher. There are no shortcuts. Do whatever is necessary, Asher replied, standing up. Just keep me informed of the steps. In the elevator, descending the 20 floors of the building, Asher tried to organize his thoughts. How had he gotten to this point? 3 weeks ago, his biggest concern was the acquisition of a new hotel. Now he was considering adoption. Adoption. The word sounded strange even in his thoughts. On the sidewalk, he looked at his watch. He had exactly 1 hour before picking up the girls from Sophia's house. His assistant had surprisingly turned out to be an excellent temporary babysitter, enchanted with the twins from their first meeting. He walked a few blocks without a specific destination, letting the conversation with Michael reverberate in his mind. The lawyer was right. There was no simple solution. Any official path would mean being separated from the girls, at least temporarily, and that idea was unbearable. Not because he felt a moral obligation, or because he feared for their well-being in the system. It was because Harper and Avery had become part of his life in a way he had never imagined possible. He remembered the night before, when Harper had insisted on helping him with his work emails, sitting on his lap, pressing random keys on the keyboard, or how Avery now waited for him at the door every night, running to hug his legs as soon as he arrived. He remembered the wall of drawings that now covered his refrigerator, the small collection of special shells and stones that the girls had gathered during a walk in the park and that now decorated his coffee table. He remembered the laughter during bath time, the stories before bed, even the occasional tantrums. All of this was now part of his home, not out of obligation, out of affection. He picked up the phone and called Sophia. "I'm coming to get them early," he said, already walking towards the parking garage. As he drove, Asher made his decision. He didn't know exactly how he would do it, what obstacles he would face, what the consequences would be. But he knew, with a certainty he had never felt in any business deal or investment, that Harper and Avery would not leave his life. Some decisions come from long deliberation, careful analysis of pros and cons. Others arise from silence, from that empty space between one heartbeat and the next, when all doubts dissipate and only clarity remains. This was a decision of silence, simple, unquestionable. His. It was a Thursday night when Asher noticed the drawing. Harper had a habit of drawing before bed, a ritual she insisted on maintaining every night. Usually, they were colorful images, rainbows, unicorns, the apartment where they now lived, the three of them together on some imaginary adventure. This one was different. A small house with gray walls and dark windows. There was no sun, no flowers, just heavy blue clouds. And three figures, two small ones holding hands, and a larger one, separate, with what looked like tears running down its face. "Who are these people?" Asher asked gently, sitting on the edge of the bed where Harper was drawing, while Avery played with her plush unicorn. "Us," Harper replied without looking up from the paper, adding another dark cloud. "Me, Avery, and Mommy." Asher felt that familiar pang in his chest. In the 5 weeks since he found them, the girls rarely spoke about their mother spontaneously. When asked, they answered with short sentences, often changing the subject soon after. Asher didn't press, fearing he would open wounds that seemed to be starting to heal. But now, looking at that drawing so different from the others, He realized the wounds had never really healed. They were just covered, hidden under the layer of new experiences and distractions. "Is this the house where you used to live?" he asked carefully. Harper nodded, now drawing what looked like a candle next to the figures. "We had candles because there was no power," she explained, as if it were something perfectly normal. Avery, who until then had seemed absorbed in her play, looked up. "Our mum's name is Eleanor," she said suddenly. Asher almost dropped the glass of water he had brought for the girls. It was the first time they had mentioned their mother's name. 5 weeks, and only now did he find out what she was called. "Eleanor," he repeated, trying to keep his voice casual. "That's a beautiful name." "Like her grandma," Harper added, still drawing. "She told us." Asher took a deep breath, recognizing the rare opportunity that presented itself. The girls were talking, sharing. He couldn't waste the moment. "What was your life like with Elena?" he asked, trying to sound merely curious, not desperate for information. The twins exchanged a look, that silent communication that always fascinated him. "Normal," Harper replied finally, shrugging, "until it got bad." "Bad how?" Asher encouraged, moving closer. "We ran out of power, out of food," Avery said, now hugging the unicorn tightly against her chest. "She cried a lot." "Every day," Harper confirmed, stopping her drawing for the first time. "At night, too. She thought we were sleeping, but I heard her." Asher tried to imagine the scene, a single mother without resources, trying to hide her desperation from her young daughters. What could have happened? Job loss, illness, abandonment by a partner. The possibilities were endless and equally heartbreaking. "What happened next?" he asked softly. "She took us to the grocery store and said she'd be back," Harper replied, the words coming out as if she had rehearsed that sentence many times in her head. "She didn't come back." The simplicity with which Harper spoke those words, "she didn't come back," hit Asher like a physical blow. There was no accusation in her voice, just a statement of fact, and that made it all the more devastating. "Did she say where she was going?" he pressed, trying to maintain his composure. Avery shook her head no. "Just that it was important, and for us to be quiet. And that she'd bring back chocolate," Harper added, a slight tremor in her lips. "But she didn't come back." Asher took a deep breath, fighting the lump forming in his throat. He wanted to ask more, to extract every detail, every fragment of information that could help piece together the puzzle. But he saw Harper's eyes starting to glisten with unshed tears, and Avery clutching her unicorn as if it were a shield. They were just children. Children who had been through a trauma they couldn't even fully comprehend. He couldn't turn this moment into an interrogation. "You know what?" he said, changing his tone. "I think we need hot chocolate right now. With marshmallows. Lots of marshmallows." The girls' faces lit up instantly at the suggestion, the difficult conversation momentarily forgotten in favor of a promise of sweetness. As they ran ahead of him to the kitchen, Asher picked up the drawing Harper had left on the bed. The grey house, the dark clouds, the crying adult figure separated from the children. Fragments of pain captured by the crayon of a 4-year-old child. He carefully folded the paper and put it in his pocket. In the kitchen, as he prepared the hot chocolate under the twins' watchful supervision, they insisted he was doing it all wrong, that it needed more chocolate, more marshmallows, less stirring. Asher tried to process what he had just discovered. Elena. He finally had a name, a concrete starting point. As he watched Harper and Avery carefully blow on their steaming mugs, a resolution formed in his mind. He had to find this woman, not just to resolve the girls' legal situation, but to understand, to know what had happened, so that Harper and Avery could have, if not complete answers, at least some kind of closure. Later, after the girls had finally fallen asleep, Harper still clutching her new drawing of unicorns under the moonlight, a clear attempt to replace the earlier image with something more cheerful, Asher sat in his home office and picked up the phone. Even though it was almost midnight, he knew Thomas O'Malley would answer. The former private investigator was a light sleeper and owed Asher a debt of gratitude that went back years, to when Asher had silently funded the treatment for Thomas's wife's cancer. "What's so important it can't wait until morning?" Thomas's hoarse voice came over the phone after the second ring. "I need you to find someone," Asher replied without preamble. Urgent. It always is, Thomas sighed. Who's the target? A woman named Elena, mother of twins, probably in her 30s, brown hair, was living in precarious conditions until recently, abandoned her daughters about 5 weeks ago. That's practically nothing, Asher, Thomas replied after a moment of silence. Do you have a last name? Hometown? Anything more specific? No, Asher admitted, the frustration evident in his voice. But the children are with me. The twins. I can get more information from them. And we have a drawing of a house. Maybe it will help identify the area. The children are with you? Thomas asked, clearly surprised. How did that happen? Long story. I'll tell you in person. Can you come to my apartment early tomorrow? I'll be there at 7 a.m., Thomas replied. He knew Asher well enough to know when something was truly important to him, and from the tone of his voice, this was it. After hanging up, Asher couldn't sleep. He walked through the silent apartment, occasionally stopping to observe the signs of the girls' presence that now dominated the space. In the living room, toys were carefully organized in the baskets Sophia had suggested buying. On the refrigerator, drawings were held up by colorful magnets. On the sofa, a small star-patterned blanket, forgotten after the previous night's movie session. He quietly entered the girls' room, once an impersonal guest room, now a vibrant space with freshly painted pale yellow walls, decorated with cloud and rainbow decals. Harper and Avery were sleeping soundly, each in her own bed, although they often still woke up during the night and ended up sleeping together. He watched their serene faces, so peaceful in sleep, so different from the serious expressions they had shown earlier while talking about Elena. What could have gone through that woman's mind? What desperation could have led her to leave 2 small children alone, promising to return with chocolate, knowing she wouldn't? Asher couldn't imagine any circumstance that would justify such an act, but he also couldn't help but think there must be more to the story. 5 weeks ago, he would have judged immediately. A mother who abandons her children deserves no forgiveness. Now, after getting to know Harper and Avery, after glimpsing fragments of their former life through casual comments and drawings, he wasn't so sure. A woman who cried at night, so her daughters wouldn't see. Who had taught Harper how to stir tomato sauce and how to detangle Avery's hair correctly. Who, according to small comments from the girls over the weeks, told stories, sang lullabies, and said, "I love you" every night. It didn't seem like the profile of someone who would abandon her daughters without an extremely serious reason. The next morning, Thomas arrived promptly at 7 a.m. Asher had been awake for hours, having finally given up on trying to sleep around 4 a.m. "You look terrible," was Thomas's greeting as he entered the apartment. "Thanks. Coffee?" "Always." They sat in the kitchen, speaking in low voices so as not to wake the still sleeping girls. Asher explained the whole situation, the encounter at the grocery store, the impulsive decision to take the girls home, the weeks that followed, and finally, the conversation from the previous night. Thomas listened attentively, occasionally making notes in a small notebook. When Asher showed him Harper's drawing, he studied it for several minutes. "Probably a peripheral area," he commented. "From the layout of the house, it looks like one of those housing projects in the East End. I'll start there." "I need to find her, Thomas," Asher said, the urgency clear in his voice. "Why?" Thomas asked, looking up from his notes. "If she abandoned the girls, what do you hope to achieve by finding her?" It was a fair question, one that Asher had asked himself repeatedly during the sleepless night. "Answers," he said finally. "For me, for them. I want to understand what happened. And what if it's just what it looks like? A mother who couldn't handle the pressure and abandoned her daughters? Then I need to know that too," Asher replied, "so I can make the right decisions from here on out." Thomas nodded, understanding. "I'll need to talk to the girls at some point. Gently, just to try and extract more details that might help." "All right, but be careful. I don't want to reopen any wounds. I'm a professional, Asher. I know how to handle traumatized children." There was a note of personal experience in Thomas's voice that Asher chose not to question. The sound of small footsteps interrupted their conversation. Avery appeared at the kitchen door, her hair disheveled, still in her pajamas, dragging her plush unicorn on the floor. "Good morning, Princess," Asher smiled, holding out his arms. Avery walked sleepily to him and climbed onto his lap, not yet fully awake. Thomas watched the scene with interest. The Asher he knew, cold, calculating, focused exclusively on his business, seemed to have been replaced by someone completely different, someone who hugged a small child with natural affection, who murmured soft words in her ear, who automatically smoothed her messy hair as if he had been doing it his whole life. "Who's he?" Avery asked, finally noticing Thomas's presence. "So this is my friend Thomas," Asher explained. "He's going to help us with some things." Avery studied Thomas with the characteristic intensity Asher had learned to recognize, a gaze that seemed to penetrate beyond appearances. "You look like a bear," she declared finally, seemingly satisfied with her analysis. Thomas laughed, surprised. With his graying beard and robust build, the comparison wasn't too far off. Harper appeared soon after, more awake than her sister, already asking about breakfast. Asher moved automatically to prepare the toast with jam that the girls preferred in the morning, while they watched Thomas with curiosity. "Wait, why are you here so early?" Harper asked directly, always the more assertive of the two. "I came to talk to Asher about work," Thomas replied, smiling. "And to meet you two, of course." "Do you live in a big apartment too?" Avery wanted to know. "No, I live in a small house with a garden." "With flowers?" Avery's eyes lit up. "Lots of flowers. My wife loved gardening." The conversation flowed naturally during breakfast, Thomas skillfully inserting casual questions that might reveal more information about Elena and their previous life. Asher watched, impressed by the investigator's subtle technique and the girl's willingness to answer. Later, when the twins went to play in the living room, Thomas turned to Asher, his face serious. "I have enough to start. From what I gathered, they lived in the East End, probably in the Hope Housing project, the one that had recurring infrastructure problems last year. Elena likely worked 2 jobs, at least one of them at night. The father was present at some point, but not recently." "How did you get all that from a conversation about flowers and toast?" Asher asked, genuinely impressed. "Years of practice," Thomas smiled briefly. "I'll start immediately. I'll call you as soon as I have something concrete." As he walked Thomas to the door, Asher stopped to watch the girls playing in the living room. Harper was organizing building blocks into a complex structure, while Avery positioned small animal figures around it. They worked in perfect sync, rarely needing to communicate their intentions verbally. On the wall behind them, Asher had created a mural with their drawings, dozens of them now accumulated over the weeks. Colorful images of their new experiences together, trips to the park, movie nights at home, the visit to the aquarium last week. But now, looking at that cheerful collection, Asher couldn't stop thinking about the drawing in his pocket, the grey house, the crying mother, the 2 small figures holding hands, alone. So colorful, yet so sad at the same time. "I will find her," he said to Thomas in a low voice, determination evident in every word, "no matter how long it takes." Thomas nodded, recognizing the resolve in the eyes of his client, friend, and benefactor. "I know you will," he replied simply. "And when you do, what do you plan to do?" Asher watched the girls for another moment before answering. "Find the truth, for them, for me." He paused. "And then, do what's right." What was right in this situation, he still didn't know. But he was sure of one thing. Harper and Avery deserved more than fragments of an interrupted story. They deserved answers. They deserved to know why they had been left behind, and he was determined to give that to them, no matter the cost. Thomas's call came at 3:47 a.m. "I found her," was all he said, when Asher answered, his voice groggy with sleep. Asher sat up immediately in bed, wide awake. "Where?" "Southside, near the river. Looks like she's been sleeping in temporary shelters and on the streets." "Are you sure it's her?" "Positive. Elena Brooks, 34 years old, matches the physical description, and she's wearing a necklace with 2 stones, one blue, one purple." The girls mentioned that necklace, remember? Asher remembered. A casual comment from Harper days ago about how her mother always wore the necklace with the colored stones. "One for each of us." "I'm on my way." After checking on the girls, sleeping soundly, and leaving a note for Sophia, Asher drove through the sleeping city to the south side. Thomas was waiting for him at a 24-hour diner near the Jefferson Bridge. He was the only customer, a cup of untouched coffee in front of him. "She's still there," he said when Asher sat down. "I checked 20 minutes ago." "What did you find out about her?" Thomas opened a thin folder. "Elena Marie Brooks, 34 years old, no criminal record. Married at 22 to James Harper. Yes. It seems Harper was named after her father. He died about 2 years ago. Construction accident. Were you able to check her employment history?" Thomas nodded. "That's where things get interesting. Her last registered job was at your company, Asher." Asher froze. "What?" "Eleanor Brooks worked for 8 months in the housekeeping department at the Grand Plaza Hotel. She was fired about 7 months ago for excessive, unexcused absences. The Grand Plaza, the oldest hotel in Asher's empire, the first one he had acquired and renovated." "That's not possible," Asher murmured. "I would have..." "You would have what?" "Noticed one cleaning lady among hundreds of employees," Thomas asked gently, but firmly. "You're the CEO, Asher. Those decisions are made by HR managers." Asher felt a weight settle in his chest. A woman had worked at his hotel, been fired, lost everything, and eventually abandoned her daughters, and he hadn't even known of her existence until the consequences literally appeared in his path. "After the termination, there are no official records," Thomas continued. "No other formal employment. From what I could gather, she did odd cleaning jobs, temporary work, anything to survive. She was evicted from her apartment about 3 months ago. And the girls? They were with her. From the information I got, she fought hard to keep them. She tried shelters, social assistance, but with 2 informal jobs and no fixed address, it became increasingly difficult." "Let's go," Asher said, standing up. Thomas led him down the dark street to a passageway under the bridge. The smell of dampness and despair was almost palpable. Small makeshift tents and blankets formed a precarious camp. "Right there," Thomas pointed discreetly. Asher saw a lone figure sitting by the river, her back against one of the bridge's pillars, even from a distance, and even though he had never seen the woman before, he knew it was Elena. There was something in her posture, in the way her head tilted slightly, that reminded him of Harper when she was thoughtful. "Say, wait here," he told Thomas. He walked slowly towards the woman, trying to make enough noise not to startle her, but not so much as to draw the attention of others. She heard his footsteps and turned quickly, her eyes instantly alert, her body tense like an animal ready to flee. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice hoarse but firm. "So what do you want?" Even in the dim morning light, Asher could see the similarities. The same face shape as Harper, the same expressive eyes as Avery. Her brown hair was now dirty and disheveled, but it was the same shade as the girl's. "My name is Asher Montgomery," he said simply, "and I believe I know your daughters." Eleanor froze. For a moment, it seemed she wasn't even breathing. Then slowly, she reached for her neck, clutching a small necklace he could now see, 2 simple stones hanging from a leather cord. "How?" she began, her voice failing. "I found Harper and Avery almost 7 weeks ago," Asher explained, keeping his voice neutral, without accusation. "Tied in the shopping cart at the Super Value Market." Elena closed her eyes, as if absorbing a physical blow. When she opened them again, they were welling with tears. "Are they okay?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," Asher replied. "They're safe, healthy, together." Elena nodded slightly, tears now streaming freely down her face, marked by time and hardship. "Thank God," she murmured. "May I sit?" Asher finally asked. Eleanor indicated the space beside her with a vague gesture. Asher sat at a respectful distance, looking out at the river just as she was. "Why?" he asked simply. There was no accusation in his voice, just a genuine need to understand. Eleanor took a deep breath, her hands clutching the necklace as if it were a talisman. "I was a cleaner at your hotel," she began, her voice low but clear. "I was fired for being absent. My daughters were sick." She paused, as if expecting Asher to argue or defend himself. When he remained silent, she continued. "Pneumonia, both of them. I had to stay at the hospital with them for almost a week. I notified my supervisor, but she shrugged. When I came back, my badge no longer worked. They said I had exceeded the allowed number of absences. Asher knew the policy: 3 unexcused absences, automatic termination. A policy he himself had approved years ago, seeing only numbers on a spreadsheet, never the faces behind them. I couldn't find anything else, Elena continued, now looking at the dark water below. I did odd jobs, cleaning, laundry, anything, but with 2 small children, with no one to watch them while I worked. She shook her head. I was evicted. We were sleeping on the streets. At the market, Elena hesitated, her voice nearly breaking. I thought someone would take better care of them. The admission hung between them, heavy as lead. I didn't want to, she added quickly, the words now tumbling out in a desperate torrent. I didn't want to leave them. But they were getting sick again. They hadn't eaten properly in days. A social worker had already approached me, threatening to take the girls because I couldn't provide for them. She finally looked directly at Asher, her eyes red but steady. I'm a terrible mother, I know that. But at that moment, I thought it was the only way for them to have a chance. Asher could have said many things at that moment. He could have judged. He could have accused. He could have offered empty platitudes about how abandoning children is never the answer. Instead, he listened. He didn't judge. He was moved. They ask about you, he said finally. Elena closed her eyes, as if the words were physically painful to hear. Harper draws the house where you used to live. Asher continued softly. Avery still hugs that plush unicorn as if it were a piece of you. They don't hate me, Elena asked, her voice almost inaudible. No, Asher answered honestly. They miss you. They're confused. Sad sometimes. But no, they don't hate you. Elena covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Asher waited, letting her process everything. When she finally composed herself, she looked at Asher with an intensity that surprised him. What do you want from me? It was a fair question, one that Asher had asked himself repeatedly during the search. What did he really want by finding Elena Brooks? I want to do what's right for Harper and Avery, he replied finally. And I believe that includes having their mother in their lives. 3 days later, Asher was in the new apartment he had rented on the west side of the city. It was small but comfortable. 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, and a full bathroom. New furniture still had tags on it. The fridge and cabinets were stocked with enough food for weeks. Basic clothes were in the closets, toiletries in the bathroom. After finding Elena, Asher had convinced her to go to the hospital. Malnutrition, anemia, an early stage of pneumonia, nothing that good medical care couldn't fix. During her 3 days in the hospital, he had arranged everything: the apartment, documents, a spot in a professional reintegration program that his company quietly sponsored. Thomas watched him as Asher checked every detail for the 3rd time. Everything's perfect, the investigator commented. Stop worrying. I want to make sure nothing is missing, Asher replied, adjusting the position of a small vase of flowers on the kitchen table. Has she been discharged from the hospital? Yes, a few hours ago. The social worker accompanied her for the final tests and is bringing her here now. Asher had changed in the past few weeks. The man who once cared only for business deals and numbers on spreadsheets was now here, setting up an apartment for a former employee he had never met, preparing for one of the most difficult moments of his life. And, more importantly, he had prepared Harper and Avery for what was to come. He hadn't yet told them he had found their mother. That would be a conversation for the next day. But he had carefully observed how they reacted when the topic of Elena came up, trying to gauge their true feelings. The intercom buzzed. Elena had arrived. Asher took a deep breath, preparing himself. It wouldn't be easy. There was so much to be discussed, so many details to be worked out, so many complex emotions to navigate. But when he opened the door and saw Elena, now clean, treated, dressed in simple hospital clothes, still frail, but with a glimmer of hope in her eyes that so much resembled her daughter's, he knew he was doing the right thing. "Sounds welcome to your new home," he said, opening the door completely. Elena entered hesitantly, looking around with wide, amazed eyes. She touched the surface of the kitchen table as if she couldn't believe it was real. "Why?" she asked simply, turning to face him. "Why are you doing all of this for us?" Asher considered the question. He could mention guilt, after all. It was his company that had fired her, starting the downward spiral. He could talk about social responsibility or philosophize about the duty of the privileged towards the less fortunate. But the truth was simpler and more profound. "Because Harper and Avery taught me something I had never truly understood before," he answered honestly. "What it means to love someone more than yourself." Elena nodded, understanding perfectly. It was, after all, what had led her to that grocery store 7 weeks ago, a desperate love and the hope for a better future for her daughters, even if without her. "Will they forgive me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "They never stopped loving you," he replied softly. "Forgiveness will come with time, and I'll be here to help through the whole process." Asher showed her the rest of the apartment, the larger room for Elena, and the smaller one he had decorated especially for the girls, with 2 identical beds, shelves for toys, and walls painted a soft yellow like their room in his apartment. "I want them to feel at home when they come," he explained, "to have a space of their own here too." When they reached the girls' room, Elena stopped at the door, unable to enter, her eyes fixed on the small beds, the empty shelves waiting for toys, the wallpaper with stars and moons. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "I don't deserve you. I don't deserve them." Asher gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "This isn't about deserving, Elena. It's about love, and you love your daughters. That's all that matters now." Silent tears streamed down Elena's face as she finally entered the room, touching the soft comforters, adjusting a small pillow, as if rehearsing for her daughter's return. "When can I see them?" Elena asked, her voice thick with contained emotion. "Tomorrow," Asher replied. "I'll talk to them tonight and bring them for a meeting here tomorrow morning, if you feel ready." Elena reached again for the necklace with the 2 stones. "I'm ready," she said simply. "I've been ready since the moment I left them." Asher nodded, knowing that tomorrow would be just the beginning of a long and complex journey. There would be tears, confusion, perhaps even moments of anger. It would be difficult for everyone involved. But looking at this woman who, despite all the mistakes and impossible circumstances, had never stopped loving her daughters, Asher felt a deep certainty that he was doing exactly what he was supposed to do. On the way back to his apartment, where Harper and Avery were waiting, unaware of the revolution about to happen in their lives, Asher looked at the colorful drawings the girls had made, now hanging all over his refrigerator, so colorful, yet so sad at the same time. He was ready to return them with respect, support, and love. Asher had already delayed this moment for 2 days. Since meeting Elena, since setting up the apartment, since talking to lawyers about the next legal steps, he knew he had to tell the girls. But every time he looked at Harper and Avery's innocent faces, the words got stuck in his throat. How do you tell 2 4-year-old children that their mother, who had abandoned them, now wanted to see them again? How do you prepare little hearts for such a complex emotion? That night, after dinner, while the girls were playing in the living room, Asher finally gathered his courage. He turned off the television, sat on the floor with them, and took a deep breath. "Harper, Avery, I need to tell you something important," he began, trying to keep his voice steady. Both immediately noticed the seriousness in his tone. Harper put down the book she was flipping through, and Avery hugged her inseparable plush unicorn eye, as she always did when she sensed something important was about to happen. "Sean, is it something bad?" Harper asked, always the more direct of the two. "No," Asher replied, realizing he truly believed it. "It's not bad, it's just big." The girls waited, looking at him with those huge, trusting eyes that, in recent weeks, had become his northian, his moral compass. "I found your mother," he said finally, the words coming out in a single exhale. For a moment, no one moved. Time seemed to freeze in the silent room, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for the children's reaction. Then, as if waking from a trance, both moved at the same time. "Mommy," Avery whispered, her eyes wide. "You found her?" Harper asked, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. The girls ran to him. They hugged him so tightly that Asher almost lost his balance. Little arms wrapped around his neck, his chest clinging as if they feared he might disappear if they didn't hold him tight enough. "Where? Where is she?" Harper asked, pulling back just enough to look into his eyes. "Is she okay?" Avery wanted to know, tears already streaming down her round cheeks. Asher hugged them back, feeling his own heart race. Their reaction was expected, of course. What child wouldn't long for their mother? But still, it hurt a little. A kind of pain he had never experienced before, completely new and strangely familiar at the same time. "She's okay," he assured them, pulling back a little so he could look at both of them. "She's in a new place, a nice apartment. Can we see her?" Harper asked, and there was so much hope in her voice that Asher felt a lump in his throat. "She wants to see you," he confirmed. "Tomorrow, if you want to." The girls exchanged that look that always intrigued him, that silent communication that seemed to happen only between twins, a whole conversation without words. "And you," Avery began, her little brow furrowed with worry. "Are you going to leave?" The question hit Asher like a punch. In all his worries about how the girls would react to the news about Elena, he hadn't considered that they might fear losing him. "I will always be around," he promised, his voice choked with emotion. "Always." Harper, ever the pragmatist, tilted her head slightly. "But we won't live here anymore. Are we going to live with Mommy?" Asher took a deep breath. He had discussed a transition plan with Elena and the social worker. The girls would start with short visits, then spend a few nights, weekends, until eventually, if all went well, they would go back to living with their mother full-time. It was the ultimate goal, what everyone agreed was best for the children in the long run. But how do you explain that to two 4-year-old children? "At first, you'll visit Mommy," he explained carefully. "And then, when everyone is ready, you'll spend more time with her. But I will always be around, I promise." Avery let out a small sigh of relief, but Harper still looked worried. "Is she mad at us?" she asked in a low voice. "Is that why she left?" Asher's heart ached. "No, Harper. She was never mad at you. She had some very difficult problems, grown-up problems, and she thought you would be safer with someone else for a while." "With you?" Avery asked. Asher smiled sadly. "She didn't know it would be me, but yes, it ended up being me." Harper, surprisingly, nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Like when you leave us with Sophia when you have a meeting. Because it's safer." The comparison, though imperfect, seemed to make sense to them, so Asher nodded. "Something like that, but now she's better and she really wants to see you." "Does she still have the necklace?" Harper asked suddenly. Asher smiled, remembering the necklace with the 2 stones that Elena clutched like a talisman. "Yes, she still has the necklace. She never took it off." That seemed to reassure the girls more than anything else he had said, as if the fact that Elena still wore the necklace was definitive proof that she still loved them. "Can we bring her drawings?" Avery asked, already getting excited about the idea. "Of course," Asher replied. "We can make special drawings tonight." The next few hours were spent in a frantic art session. The girls created dozens of drawings, portraits of the family, of the house where they used to live, of Asher, of themselves. As they drew, they asked 1,000 questions. Did Mommy still know how to make heart-shaped pancakes? Did she still sing that lullaby? Did the new apartment have a big window like the old one? Asher answered what he could, but many questions he simply didn't know the answer to. "You can ask her tomorrow," he would say, and the girls would accept, adding each new curiosity to a mental list that seemed to grow by the minute. At bedtime, the girls were exhausted but electrified. They took a long time to fall asleep, whispering to each other long after Asher had turned off the lights and left the room. Sitting alone in the living room, looking at the pile of drawings on the coffee table, Asher felt a strange mix of emotions. Joy that Harper and Avery had the chance to reconnect with their mother, pride that he had been a part of making it possible. But also, undeniably, a quiet, whispering fear that once Elena was back in the girls' lives, he would become unnecessary, dispensable. It was a selfish fear, he knew. The girls deserved their mother. Elena deserved a second chance, And well, he would go back to his life before, his hotels, his meetings, his lonely dinners, except it wouldn't be like before. Nothing would be like before, because now he knew what it was like to have his immaculate apartment invaded by children's laughter. He knew what it was like to worry about someone more than himself. He knew what it was like to love unconditionally. The next morning, the drive to Elena's apartment was quiet. The girls, normally chatty, were silent, each holding tightly to their pile of drawings. Asher didn't speak either, concentrating on driving, mentally rehearsing how he would conduct this first meeting. When they finally arrived, Asher knelt in front of the girls before ringing the bell. "Remember," he said softly, "your mum is very happy to see you. But she's also a little nervous, so if she cries, don't worry. They're happy tears." The girls nodded solemnly. Harper adjusted the little dress she had insisted on wearing, even though she usually preferred pants. Avery clutched her drawings against her chest like a shield. Asher rang the bell. The door opened almost immediately, as if Elena had been waiting on the other side, counting the seconds. She looked different from the woman Asher had found under the bridge, healthier, cleaner, but still visibly nervous. She wore a simple dress that Asher had provided, and the necklace with the 2 stones shone against her skin. For a moment, everyone stood motionless, Eleanor looking at her daughters as if she couldn't believe they were real. The girls looking at their mother with expressions impossible to decipher. Asher watching the scene, his heart in his throat. Then, as if a spell was broken, the girls dropped their drawings, which scattered on the floor, and ran. Eleanor fell to her knees, arms outstretched, and the 3 collided in a hug so intense they seemed to merge into a single being. There were tears, lots of tears. Eleanor sobbed openly, murmuring her daughters' names over and over like a prayer. Harper and Avery cried too, clinging to their mother as if they feared she might disappear at any moment. "My girls," Elena managed to say between sobs, "my beautiful girls." "Mommy," Harper replied, her voice choked but strong. "We missed you." "So much," Avery added, burying her face in her mother's neck. Asher remained at the door, feeling simultaneously an essential part of that moment and a complete intruder. Tears streamed freely down his own face, and he didn't even try to stop them. After long minutes of hugs and tears, the girls began to calm down. Avery was the first to pull away a little, looking at her mother with her big, curious eyes. "Do you still know how to make heart-shaped pancakes?" she asked, the question so simple and childlike that it made everyone smile through their tears. "Of course I do," Elena replied, wiping her tears. "Do you want me to make some for you now?" Avery nodded enthusiastically, and the initial moment of tension was broken. The 4 of them entered the apartment, and soon the girls were showing Elena their drawings, telling her about their new school, about Sophia, about how Asher didn't know how to do braids properly. The family was rebuilding itself before Asher's eyes, not as it was before but in a new way, stronger perhaps, because now it included not only Eleanor and the girls, but also him, in some way he didn't fully understand yet. In the weeks that followed, a new routine was established. The girls spent some days with Asher, others with Elena. The transition was smoother than any of them had anticipated. The children seemed to flourish, happy to have their mother back, but equally happy to keep Asher in their lives. Elena was starting over with dignity. She was attending a professional training program, had sessions with a social worker, and was slowly rebuilding her life. The apartment that initially seemed too big for her now had personal touches, a few plants, photos of the girls, even some of the countless drawings they produced daily. The girls had started attending a good school near Elena's apartment. Asher made a point of taking them or picking them up at least twice a week, staying present and involved. It was on one of those afternoons, as they walked from school to Elena's apartment, that Harper asked the question Asher secretly dreaded. "Are you going to disappear? Are you going to forget about us?" Asher stopped walking, surprised by the direct question. Avery also stopped, looking at him with the same worried expression as her sister. Asher knelt, getting down to their level, and looked directly into Harper's eyes. "Never," he replied firmly. "You don't disappear from someone who lives in your heart." He gently placed his hand on Harper's chest. I am a part of you. You are a part of me. Even when we live only with Mommy? Avery asked, her small voice betraying the insecurity she felt. Even then, Asher assured her, I will visit you. You will visit me. We'll go to the park, the zoo, all the places you want to go. Promise, Harper insisted, holding out her pinky finger in a solemn gesture. I promise, Asher replied, linking his finger with hers, and then with Avery's. Some people come into our lives and change everything. You changed everything for me, and that will never ever go away. The girls seemed satisfied with the answer. Harper took his left hand, Avery his right, and they continued walking towards Elena's apartment. Asher looked at the two small figures by his side, so confident in their place in the world now, so sure that they were loved. 7 weeks ago, he had found them abandoned in a shopping cart. Now they had not only their mother back, but also him, one more adult in their lives who loved them unconditionally. It wasn't the traditional family arrangement, it wasn't what any of them had planned or expected, but somehow it was exactly what they all needed. As they climbed the stairs to the apartment, where Eleanor was waiting for them with dinner, Asher realized that life rarely follows the paths we imagine. Sometimes it's the unexpected detours, the unplanned interruptions, that lead us exactly where we're supposed to be. He had planned to find the girls a mother to return them. Instead, he ended up expanding the definition of family, for the girls, for Elena, and most surprisingly, for himself. When the apartment door opened and Elena greeted them with a genuine smile, Asher knew that, somehow, they had all found their way home. Asher's routine has completely changed in the last few months. Executive meetings now have a fixed end time. Business trips are shorter. His calendar is organized around a sacred commitment. Every weekend, without exception, he visits the girls. Friday afternoon, promptly at 5 o'clock, Asher parks in front of Elena's building. He always brings something. Flowers for Eleanor. Simple daisies she prefers to expensive roses. A new book for Harper, who is increasingly interested in stories about female explorers and scientists. Some small surprise for Avery, who collects unicorns and butterflies with almost scientific dedication. This Friday, as he climbs the familiar steps, balancing the flowers and gifts, Asher feels the weight of the week dissipate. Tense meetings, complicated negotiations, difficult decisions. Everything seems to belong to another life when the door opens and two excited voices shout his name as if announcing the arrival of a hero. Asher! Asher's here. Harper and Avery launch themselves against his legs like small projectiles, almost knocking him over. Eleanor appears behind them, smiling with that mix of gratitude and friendship that now characterizes their relationship. I brought something for you, Harper announces solemnly, pulling him by the hand into the apartment. It's a school project. The apartment is different from when Asher first set it up. Now it has personality, plants in the corners, framed photos on the walls, toys organized in colorful baskets. It looks like a home. Harper drags him to the kitchen table, where an object covered by a cloth awaits. With a dramatic flourish, she removes the cloth, revealing a small model. It's the solar system, she explains proudly, but I can't get Saturn to stay right. Meanwhile, Avery timidly pulls on his shirt sleeve. Can I show you something too? She asks, her voice softer than her sister's. Avery leads him to the window, where her new bicycle rests against the wall. A small pink bicycle, with training wheels and a basket decorated with plastic flowers. I want to learn to ride, she announces, without the training wheels, like Harper. Tomorrow morning, Asher promises, crouching down to Avery's level. We'll go to the park early when there aren't many people. The weekend follows its familiar and precious course. Friday night, movies and pizza on the couch, the girls gradually succumbing to sleep against his shoulder. Saturday, the park early in the morning, Asher running alongside Avery's bike, holding her steady, then letting go for brief moments, witnessing her joy mixed with terror as she realizes she's balancing on her own. In the afternoon, he helps Harper with her solar system, fixing Saturn with a hot glue gun and infinite patience. Then board games, laughter, the girls telling him about school, about friends, about small daily victories and defeats. Sunday is for making pancakes together, visiting the zoo or the museum depending on the weather, homework in the afternoon, stories before bed, and then, as always, the moment Asha secretly dreads, Sunday night, the time to leave. "You'll be back on Friday?" Harper asks, as she always does, even though she knows the answer. "I'll be back," Asha promises, kissing her forehead. "And you'll help me ride my bike more," Avery insists, clinging to his leg. "We'll practice until you become a champion," he assures her. Eleanor walks him to the door after the girls finally let him go after multiple hugs and farewell kisses. "Thank you," she says simply, as she always does. "You don't have to thank me," he replies, as he always replies. It's a ritual, these goodbyes. A carefully choreographed dance that everyone follows week after week, making the separation bearable because they know it's temporary. When Asha finally gets home, his apartment greets him with silence. It's impeccably clean, as the cleaning crew always leaves it. Everything in its place. No scattered toys, no lost socks, no leftover dinner in the sink. He walks slowly through the rooms, feeling the contrast between the cheerful chaos he just left and the perfect, empty order that now surrounds him. In the kitchen, he opens the refrigerator to get some water. There, held by a magnet, is a new drawing. It wasn't there when he left on Friday. The drawing shows a shopping cart, surrounded by 4 stick figures, 2 small, 2 large. In the center, a bright red heart connects all the figures. Asha recognizes Harper's style, her careful lines, the attention to detail. In the corner, in uneven letters, is written, "Our family started here." He touches the drawing gently, feeling a lump in his throat. "That's where it all started," he murmurs to the silent apartment, "and now it will never end." The silence around him no longer feels empty. It feels full of memories, of love, of fulfilled promises and intertwined futures, full of the voices of Harper and Avery, who even when absent fill every corner of his life. His apartment, once just a space where he slept between meetings, has transformed into something more. It now holds the memories of the twins running through the hallways, of laughter at dinner, of stories before bed. It is now a place where silence doesn't mean loneliness, but expectation, the interval between one visit and the next. Somewhere in the city, 2 little girls fall asleep in their beds, knowing they are loved. And in the apartment that once seemed too big for one man alone, Asher Montgomery has finally found the peace that comes from a heart that has expanded beyond all the limits he ever imagined possible. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.